Hey everyone, welcome to Youth Bombs. I'm Craig.
I'm Holden.
I'm Carson.
And we're the voice of young conservatives in Alachua County. We're looking today at the goings on with TikTok and the potential ban of the app. Carson, there's been a lot of discussion on this, a lot of thoughts. Do you think that a TikTok ban would be beneficial or not, and why?
I don't think a TikTok ban would be very beneficial. The main reason is that I'm not entirely sure. I know for the most part, it's definitely not a national security threat that's overblown, and we've seen it be overblown, all throughout the past. They've always used the threat of a national security threat as a way to, say that something should be banned or we should, infringe on your rights somehow. But the main reason is that a lot of the stuff that they're actually alleging TikTok has done is stuff that other social media companies based in the United States have already done. A lot of the data infringements and that kind of thing. And so while it's definitely not a national security threat, it's also just the fact that you're basically picking and choosing TikTok as the problem, mainly to give an advantage to American companies, specifically Facebook. We all know who's pushing this. It's Mark Zuckerberg. So.
Understandable, and I definitely agree. I oppose the ban. I think that the line of argument with the data mining goes that we can trust American companies more than Chinese companies because we have an adversarial relationship with Xi Jinping. Now, yes, I don't trust the American big tech companies either. So is it worth banning, though? No, I say we keep it. Though there is question on whether government devices should be using it. I think that I would be in favor of keeping off those phones.
Definitely, 100%. That there should be no debate about that. The one question is, aren't they based in Singapore, though?
I am not positive on that. I thought it was China, but China has a law that all technology companies must be controlled in some manner by the Chinese Communist Party. So they report to the CCP at the end of the day.
Yeah, but that's like a really slippery slope. It's like, are we really going to ban every single company or website or app that's based in China in some form? Are we going to ban Shein and Temu? I just can't help but think that's a little bit absurd.
Understandable. Holden, how do you feel about this?
Don't ban it. The government doesn't have a role here, so just please. This is just insane that this is even being talked about, to be honest.
And do you feel that it's providing good economic value for the country and advertisers and users?
I mean, people waste a lot of time on it, so that's a consideration. But yeah, it does create economic value, of course, because you're allowing people to see things, products, and services that they might buy. So there's a reason advertising is so big. It's because it works.
Yeah,
so
and it's certainly an economic good. I think that anything that you could say about people wasting their time on it, people waste their time on all sorts of social media, and I feel like of all of them, TikTok is the one that's definitely stimulating the economy the most. It's looking like you have the TikTok shop, you have all these creators who are now creating platforms, and then they're going on to start small businesses of it, or they're just using the ad revenue that they get on TikTok. There's so many people who probably make a passive $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a year that it might not make or break their lives, but it certainly helps increase their quality of life just by having that extra expendable money. So yeah, I definitely think it's an economic good overall. Obviously, TikTok sucks. I hate TikTok. I just deleted it. So many people are on this app way too much. They are literally letting it rot their brain. So many people, especially in our generation, now will not watch a movie. They won't sit through a movie because they're just so used to the constant stimulation of something new every 5 seconds, just being able to swipe. But that's a problem with all social media companies. Are we going to go after all social media companies for rotting the brains of our youth? Absolutely not. That is a choice you have to make every day, and that's a choice that, frankly, many people in this country have to stop making every day.
Now, that's an interesting point with youth, because Florida, where we are at, just passed a law in the past couple months that says that young people around 13, 14, they have to get explicit permission from their parents to create a social media account. I think that's too invasive. It should be up to the parent to decide, not the government mandating that, yes, you must get your parents' permission and you must do this and that. But how do we feel about that?
Definitely, I agree with you. I think, it's all nanny state. It's saying that you don't know how to parent your kid and that, the government needs to step in and parent your kid for you because the government can parent your kid better. We all know where this comes from. We all know where this heads. When used on the right or the left, it's really like it's something we should all look out for. It's very, very collectivistic.
And we should count ourselves fortunate that the legislator didn't adopt the original proposal, which was to ban social media completely for those under 18. That would have been absolutely ridiculous. But Holden, on the side of TikTok and small businesses operating to increase their revenue and get out there, do you think that it's a good tool for that?
I mean, clearly, if the market shows, yeah. Like, if it wasn't, then nobody would be advertising their stuff there, and nobody would be, or few people would be trying to promote their stuff on it. So clearly, it works. So just let people decide if they want to use it or not, and if they want to sell stuff or not, and that's going to deliver the best outcomes.
Makes sense. And are you aware, say, of the benefits that advertising has on prices?
Yeah, I mean, you're trying, generally speaking, you're trying to target a specific person. So the data is pretty good online. They have really good data, especially on Google and Facebook, that you could target people with. And I'm sure it's similar on TikTok, even though I don't know for sure. But yeah, I mean, it helps you. It helps them save on advertising because they don't have to. They don't have to appeal to a broader audience. They could really choose who they want, the income level, the type of person, the gender, the age, all of that stuff. So yeah, at the end of the day, getting it as close to the person, the avatar that they want as possible is, of course, going to make it so that they don't have to spend as much and to get it out there, and the savings will be passed on to you eventually.
Right. Can't target everyone.
That's something that we definitely saw. This is probably a bad word for this, but weaponized by the Trump campaign, where the Harris campaign was doing a lot of big media markets, the entirety of Pittsburgh or the entirety of Philadelphia or the entirety of Detroit or that kind of thing. The Trump campaign was actually spending way less per voter because they were specifically targeting voters who they really wanted to go after. For instance, specifically young men, and how we saw young men shift. I think it was double digits, if not more. So yeah, you definitely saw that get used during this past election cycle. It's definitely something that's becoming way. I mean, for better or for worse, they have all basically data about all of us and all of our different belief systems and that kind of thing, and what we're most likely to do based on demographic data. So it definitely certainly helped Trump in his re-election effort, or re-election, but third go at the presidency. The one thing I will say too is because of Trump being elected over Kamala Harris, it's now looking like the ban's not going to happen, or at least it has more. There's more of a fighting chance for TikTok. Shortly after his re-election, they were talking about he went and had a meeting with Mark Zuckerberg. So people were saying maybe Trump will go along with it, but then he actually said, I think he scouted the Supreme Court and basically said, "Can we get a pause on this and try to renegotiate?" So it's looking like, for whatever reason, whatever moral reason Trump has for doing this, it's looking like it might not actually happen.
Right, yeah. And it's interesting because I believe about 4 years ago, he was in favor of banning TikTok. Is that correct?
I don't know.
Yeah, he was. There was a huge conversation, especially right around COVID, that TikTok might get banned. And I think this I think it's very personal for Trump. I think Trump thinks, that he was went after by these social media companies and they were inherently anti-Trump and they tried to push anti-Trump messaging. You can agree or disagree with that. So I think it is very personal, but it's a good result either way. It's definitely not something that should happen. So if Trump uses his personal bias against Facebook and Meta to not ban TikTok, I'm perfectly fine with that.
I gotcha. And I think this also just brings into the larger conversation about data rights and data privacy. Laws like the CCPA in California, which states that users have the right to stop their data from being processed by companies over a certain size. Carson, how do you feel about that? Should companies have to abide by that, or do you think that California is wrong in granting that right?
Obviously, I think generally speaking, companies should have the right to collect your data, anything you're making available to them by using their platform. They should have the right to collect. At the same time, a lot of these really big companies are propped up by the government, and they kind of are actually working directly with the government, or at the very least directly with the political parties, as we saw with the Trump campaign, and I'm sure as we'll see in the future with all sorts of campaigns. And so it does feel a little bit weird to me that you have the government basically directly working with these companies saying, what can we do to target the specific people we want? It's like, it does feel a little dystopian. I'm not sure if the answer is directly government involvement. It usually isn't. I would say the better answer might be to, for the general culture to become more aware of what is happening when you go on these different sites, to switch to DuckDuckGo instead of Google and that kind of thing, to, be more conscious of what these social media companies are doing. And if, even if you're okay with it and it's like something you're okay with doing, at the very least, just know what's happening and just be aware of what's happening so that way we can all be more cautious, because I definitely feel like it is a problem. I don't think the government needs to step in, though.
I'll comment on that. I mean, it's very simple. If you agree to give up your data, then they have a right to use it. That's not a right. You don't have a right to make it so that companies can or can't do something, really. That's not a right. I don't like that phrasing. You have a right to property, and that's it. So you don't have a right to tell companies what they can or can't do with their own property. So if you agree to use their website or their app or whatever, and they say that, hey, just so you know, we're going to collect data on this, then that's what you agree to do. And you could choose to do that or not to do that. But yeah, that's your right. Your right is to choose. That's not, it's not to tell companies what they can or can't do. And secondly, companies collecting data is something I don't think is a rational fear to have, unless the government takes control of that data. Because a company at the end of the day is just trying to make money. So how can I give ads to the best companies that are trying to target the specific customer? That's what they're collecting data for. At the end of the day, these companies want to make money. The government, on the other hand, is going to do it for political reasons. And the FBI collecting data and the CIA collecting data, I'm far more scared of. Right? If the government doesn't like me, they could throw me in jail, and they could find something that, like, hey, I didn't pay property tax, or let's say sales tax on some good I bought at a garage sale or something, and now I go to jail. And like, that's something that I would want. That's something that I would be scared of. If I were, that's the only thing I'm scared of when it comes to data. Just if the government gets control of it. If a company gets control of it, I don't really care, because I just know they're trying to make money. It's that simple. And if they do try and publicize your data unnecessarily, then that's going to backfire. So it's not really in their interest.
I think mass surveillance is definitely a huge problem when it comes to the government. The NSA is blatantly violating the Fourth Amendment, as we saw with what Edward Snowden released in 2013. Though when it comes to companies, my opinion, even though it's not the government and they don't have the force of a gun behind them, I still think that there are genuine negative consequences for companies being able to do whatever they want with the data, even though, say, you're not forced to use their platform. When you have a certain size of the market that, everyone is using the platform, then there's no way around it, essentially, for modern life. And in that case, it's like, well, should we have some regulation, which I think would be beneficial, that doesn't end the world for these companies? They can continue making billions and billions, but gives users some control over their data and how it's processed. Just like, for example, we have the do not track and do not sell banners now popping up. Companies are still making huge amounts of money, but it also gives the user a say in how their data is used, and they can still track everyone who is okay with it.
They do have a say.
Well, the say is, just avoid, all modern technology.
Listen, if there's really, they do have a say. You say control. You said they have a say and they have control if there's some sort of regulation set up, and they always have a say. They always have control in a market economy. That's like literally the basis of capitalism is you have voluntary exchange between individuals.
I would just go further and say what you're actually seeing, like you're saying, there's a lot of do not track, do not sell my data banners popping up. Like, yeah, that is proof actually that the free market is working. That there's so many people saying, I don't want my data being sold or taken or harvested or whatever, and I'm going to pick platforms that are not going to do this. And so that I would say is a manifestation of like the free market and of why the free market's working so well. It's because so many people are voting with their dollar or voting with their attention and to go to platforms that are not doing this or are doing this to a lesser extent.
I would agree with that, except do not sell is one of those government regulations. But I suppose to your point, something that could validate it is the fact that we have browsers like Firefox with enhanced privacy settings and ad blockers that people just donate to. It's not say, oh, you have to pay $10 a month to use this. So there are options out there, but I think one of the problems is just the non-tech aware segment of the country. Like, try explaining third-party cookies to your typical grandfather, right? They're not necessarily going to know.
And I mean, but back to Holden's point, the consequence at hand here is basically your grandfather's now going to get advertised more accurately too. It's like, that's not really such a negative consequence. And if there are more, devastating things happening here, if there's like, I don't know, a bunch of people who are having personal information completely posted online, like, yeah, maybe that is something different. That is something that needs to be looked at separately. But most of the time, probably about 99% of the time, we are looking at people who just want to advertise more accurately to you, that just want to sell you a product better or sell specific people a product and, avoid the people who are not likely to buy the product.
Mm-hmm. I see that. I think, though, something, for example, with medical privacy, that's really key, like not having Google Analytics on a doctor's website. That I see a lot of validity in, because I don't think that medical private information should be something that companies can now amass and collect and use to market to you or sell or do things that you wouldn't want with it, right? Like, because we don't necessarily tell everyone on the street, hey, I have like this medical condition or that medical condition. So I think that that's just a logical extension of that.
No, because you can say that. You can tell them that or you can not tell them that. And it's the same with a doctor if they're going to be using some sort of website that where your data is going to be in there, and as long as they disclose that to you, it's not fraud. It's just the way. I mean, there's always going to be trade-offs that you have to make, and yes, it's not in Google's interest. It's not in Facebook's interest. It's not in these companies' interest to make it so that your life is harder. It's literally the opposite. They want to make your life easy. They want to use that data to make more money. And so I think like the incentives are much more aligned for a company than it is for something like the FBI or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense, though. I would say that the profit motive in those cases, yeah, usually it's going to benefit society, but there are things that a company can profit off of that are going to be detrimental to the end user. I think that we could look at, say, people using someone's image without permission, right? Like that, someone may not want that to be done to them, and yet, boom, there you are. But any closing thoughts from you, Holden?
Sorry.
Like, what do you mean by an image? Like, if they take a picture of?
If they say use your likeness in a manner that perhaps makes you look distasteful.
Okay, so give me an example.
I think, for instance, online avatars or things of that nature. I think the particulars of it are less important than what is going to be possible with the advent of technology continuously being furthered. So while there may not be strong examples at the moment because we do have regulation and such things aren't occurring as naturally as they would be if there was nothing in place.
The internet is so decentralized and images are so cheap to store digitally and once it's on the internet, it's forever. So, I mean, it's just something people have to know. So if you're gonna post a picture or you're gonna send crazy stuff to people or post crazy stuff, I mean, it's on you. It's no different than if I if I do something stupid in the real world and not in the digital world, then there are going to be consequences for that. And so, I mean, I think there's always trade-offs you have to make. Whenever you're more free, you're more responsible for yourself. So, I mean, there's always going to be trade-offs made, but I don't want to take up this whole time.
Gotcha. And Carson, it sounded like you had a thought.
Yeah, I was just going to say, specifically the medical records, there is kind of a problem in the medical industry with the government kind of having gotten in bed with a lot of these corporations. And so now there's a very limited supply of, for instance, healthcare companies, in which case restricting a very specific part of the market right now, preferably that entire market would be liberalized, but restricting a segment of the market that is currently basically propped up by the government, like I would actually
more regulation.
The issue is we're talking about restricting a company that has been propped up by the government. So it'd be like if I basically restricted your options. There's options A to Z, and I restrict them from A to G, and A to G are all doing this bad thing. Well, then, yeah, I think you should have the opportunity not to have that bad thing done to you. Preferably, you have options A to Z. But right now, we don't have options A to Z. We just have options A to G. So I think, in specific instances, this is like less the broader, tech landscape and more specific companies. But yeah, I could be convinced of that. It comes down to the specifics of when a company is propped up specifically by the government, which is specifically our healthcare industry a lot. But yeah.
Makes sense. Well, that being said, thanks everyone so much for watching. We really appreciate it. We upload 3 times a week. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you have any questions for us, feel free to reach out at youthbombs@alatrorepublicans.com. Thanks so much, everyone.